Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us, whether you are watching or listening. And welcome to Legal Insights. I'm Jill Bloom, group publisher of Roofing Contractor, Walls and Ceilings, and Building Enclosure, and honored to welcome our legal expert, Trent Cotney, partner with Adams and Reese. Trent, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Jill, it's great to be here.
Well, just wanted to have you focus on what you were explaining to me about the big issue with non-competes happening right now for all contractors across the country. What is happening and what does everybody need to know?
Yeah, so just recently, last Thursday, the Federal Trade Commission came out with a proposed rule that would ban non-competes. And, for those of our listeners that don't know what that is, basically it's a provision that's included oftentimes within an employment agreement that prevents you from going to a competitor for a certain period of time, usually 2 years or less. This is a big deal. It's a long way from being approved, right? It still has to go through rulemaking. It'll probably be challenged legally. But if it goes into effect for those states that allow non-competes, it's a potentially good thing for employees, but for employers that are using them to, make sure that their C-level people stay in place or their critical people are there. It creates sort of an interesting dynamic for them because there's a lot of issues out there. Obviously, lack of skilled labor on any level is the biggest threat to construction right now. So it'll be very interesting to see how ultimately this plays out. But again, this is pretty big news given how many states do allow non-competes and how often you see them, especially in the higher level position type employment agreements.
Yeah, and it sounds like, Trent, I mean, this is a big deal, not just for contractors, but even manufacturers.
Yeah, it's any
It's
employer,
everybody.
right? Any employer, and it oftentimes, one of the things you and I were talking about is I see in these employment agreements where they have restrictive covenants like non-competes, and oftentimes they will offer the employee additional consideration in order to sign that provision. So they may say, for additional $10,000, agree to sign this non-compete or whatever, right? So the question becomes is that if this rule goes through, do employers have to notify those employees that have non-competes that they're now void? And then do the employees have to give back that money? Right. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of legal issues. There's a ton of litigation on non-competes that's out there. One of the heaviest litigated areas in employment law. So it'll be very interesting, again, great for employees, great for, mobility and things like that. But if you're an employer paying top dollar for a C-level type person that has access to a lot of different information, it's going to be interesting. I think one of the things, Jill, that we'll see is that we'll see employment agreements get more creative if it passes. I think what you will see is use of non-solicitation, meaning that you can't solicit customers, use of confidentiality, creating other, retention type bonuses and things of that nature. So I could see ways where employers will get creative, but yeah, huge news because there's so many employers that currently use it, both on the manufacturing, distribution and contractor side.
So approximately how many states across the country actually allow non-competes? I didn't realize that there was actually some states that didn't.
Yeah, there's quite a few that allow it. California is an example of one that doesn't. Other states have limitations depending on what you do. For example, there's usually three things that any state that allows them will look at. One is duration. How long is it? So you can't have it forever, right? It's usually two
Right.
years or less. One is geographic region. So if you have an employee that only works in Florida, let's say, and they go move to Wyoming, that non-compete probably won't hold unless you also do work in Wyoming and have some additional language in there. And then the third thing that courts often look at is the type of work. So if let's say you are a project manager at a roofing company and then you switch and you go work for another roofing company, but it's in marketing. Okay, those are two completely different types of jobs. Oftentimes courts take a critical look at that as well. So there are restrictions, and the state by state, some of the laws change, but yeah, it's a lot of states have it. I don't know the exact number, but I would say more than don't. So it's
Sure.
going to be interesting.
So you mentioned about getting creative. Let's talk about getting creative for a minute. So if I'm a contractor and I own a large construction company, whether it's roofing or walls and ceilings, and I'm hiring somebody right now and I see that this is possibly on the horizon, what would be the first thing that you would change in your employment contract?
So
get
what I would consider doing is, obviously you want to have those other restrictive covenants like non-solicitation of employees and customers after you leave, protection of confidentiality and proprietary information. None of that's being touched, right? So you would still have that in there. The one thing I would think about is sort of a belt and suspenders approach. So if you have a non-compete in your employment agreement, if for some reason that gets knocked out, you have something else that you can rely on. One of the things I've seen used in the past is a vested compensation schedule. So you may have certain bonuses or other things that are benefits that are vested over a period of time, which acts as a retention model. It doesn't necessarily prevent them from leaving, but it does create a disincentive for them to leave. So I think ultimately you and again, I had some interesting comments when I was talking to contractors about this. The best way to keep employees is to make sure they're happy, right? Then you don't have to worry about competition. But
Exactly.
often that's easier said than done. So.
Well, very good insight, Trent. Clearly, we'll be talking more about this as time goes on. And thank you so much for the insight and the update, so we always know what's going on. If anybody has any questions, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure, they can reach me at trent.cotney@arlaw.com.
Sounds excellent. And if anybody has any questions for us, it's roofingcontractor.com, wconline.com, or buildingenclosureonline.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for all our free content so you can stay up to date on our videos and the great legal insights from Trent Cotney. Thanks again, Trent, and everyone, have a good day.